Welcome to Red Deer Public Library's Travel Memories program. Today we're really fortunate to have Nancy with us. She's going to talk about kayaking on Haida Gwaii, an exciting thought for us landlocked people. So this is a program that actually started in September of 2013, and Nancy is not new to this program. She has spoken before. The most recently was about the bicycle trip that she took in Vietnam, and that was very exciting. She has an outdoor theme here, and this time we get to see kayaking on Haida Gwaii, but not the camping style, but the style where you get to stay in the lodge. So the best of both. So, how are you today, Nancy?
I'm well. I'm looking forward to sharing some really wonderful memories. First of all, I would like to say that I am very happy to be able to give a little something back to Red Deer Public Library by doing this today. In the 25 or so years that I've lived in Red Deer, I have used the services of the library in so many different ways and just enjoyed so many events that I feel I'm a heavy user, shall we say, of the library, and I like to promote it whenever I can. So when Priscilla asked me if I would consider doing this, I said, well, yes. However, I went with the friend who did all the photos. I don't have any photos, so to speak. And so if I can get those from Pam, then we will, I will do the best I can. So Pam is part of this as well. Pam is in Toronto, and Priscilla worked on the PowerPoint with me. So the whole idea, my interest in Haida Gwaii began a number of years ago when I saw one of my favorite journalists, Valerie Pringle, do maybe an hour-long special on Haida Gwaii, shot up there. And every scene was bathed in brilliant sunshine. And I thought, I've never been there, but I have done things on the coast, and I'm pretty sure there's a very small window for that kind of weather up there. So I began to watch, when the dates for this particular lodge-based tour were. I began to watch the weather and think about going in a few years. And I had done some kayaking in the Broken Islands out from Port Alberni with a group from U of C, and stayed in the lovely Sea Shark Lodge. And I knew that I was past the point where I wanted to camp in these situations. So, all right, now I need to move to the next slide here. And I'm just a little bit unsure. Oh, okay, there we are. So on the web, I found this Butterfly Tours, which Gord Hiscock has run for 30 some years. And he had 3 different ways that you could experience Haida Gwaii with him. He would take 6 people to Rose Harbor Guest House. He took probably about the same number on a camping trip shortly after that week. And then he had a sailing one where, he lived on the sailboat and kayaked off from there during the day. So I contacted this friend, Pam, who had said, she'd love to join me if I was ever going on a kayak tour, and she was keen. So we signed on in September before the following July, because, as I said, I'd seen how the spots filled up. And one of the things that happened early on in the process that I'd sort of forgotten about till now is when I was starting to do the paperwork, or not even, Gord said to me, have you looked at such and such a part of the website where it talks about, 2 people coming on the trip together? And I said, no, direct me. So the gist of this part of the website was, because he said to me, you know, does your friend Pam really want to do this? And, you know, can she do it? And all of this. And I said, oh yeah, you know, we've got similar backgrounds and so on. So when I read that part of the website, I'd done lots of outdoor group things like the bike tour and so on, but I'd never seen this before. And I thought, yeah, well, it's 30 years experience. So the gist of what he said was, make sure that if you're registering with another person, whether it's your spouse or friend, that both of you are committed to this trip and want to do it. And then he said something along the lines of, not I'll kayak this year and with you, and next year we'll go to Paris for me, kind of thing. So anyway, we got that paperwork done, and we got ourselves signed up for the July tour the following summer. So Haida Gwaii was known as the Queen Charlotte Islands until about 2010, when it was renamed the Haida Gwaii Reconciliation Act, renamed it. And it's sometimes referred to as the Canadian Galapagos. It consists of Graham Island in the north and Moresby Island to the south, along with a collection of over 400 smaller islands. And the Haida Gwaii have sovereignty over these islands, and they share that governance with the federal government in a protected area known as Gwaii Hana's National Reserve and Haida Heritage Site, which was the southernmost part of Moresby Island, which is where we were headed. And there are 2 small airports on Haida Gwaii. And of course, there's a BC ferry terminal at Skidegate. I believe I'm saying that properly. The northern island has 120 kilometers of paved road, and the southern, Moresby Island, has very little, has only 20 kilometers of paved road. So we flew to Sandspit, and we were booked into on the North Island, or yeah, no, we were in Moresby, and we were booked into one of the B&Bs not far from the airport for 2 nights before we headed out with the group to Rose Harbor. And when I was thinking about moving from the airport to the B&B and this great big duffel bag full of, you know, all the stuff you take when you're going to be cold and wet and kayaking, and, you know, I couldn't find any information about taxis on the island. So I phoned the B&B and asked, and I said, how do people get from the airport to your place? And she said, oh, it's not far. We're just 5 minutes from the airport, and most people just walk. We're just down the hill. I thought, okay, this is new territory. And I said, and their luggage? Because like I said, I had a fairly big Mac duffel bag. And she said, yeah, they just grab a cart from the airport and use that. And I thought, all right. So when we landed, or when I landed, I went into the gift shop and got kind of pleasantly distracted by this topographical map that was in a showcase, and spent more time in the gift shop than I probably planned to, maybe 10 minutes. And when I came out, the airport was deserted. There was no luggage on the carousel. There was no carousel. There was virtually no people. There was one person at the car rental, and then down at the other end, the Air Canada wicket was still open. So I went down and told the girl, I said, okay, here's my story. I got no bag. And she said, well, took my info and gave me the little toiletries bag. And, you know, good luck with that kind of thing. So off I went to the B&B, and I thought, well, the good news is this little trip down the hill is even easier when you don't have your luggage. But the bad news is I'm heading out for a week on the water in a day or so, and I might not have any of my stuff. So later that night, I got a call on my cell phone where this fellow who is in Charlotte City sheepishly admitted that he had grabbed the bag off the carousel thinking it was his buddy's, and he would bring it by in the morning. So I was without my stuff just for one night. And even though Charlotte is not that far, looking at it on a map, it's the kind of driving that, you know, takes a long time. So the next day, we explored the shoreline around Sandspit, and then we took the ferry over to Skidegate to the Haida Heritage Center and Museum, which is something not to be missed if you make a visit to Haida Gwaii. And the center had opened in 2000, the doors opened in 2007. But prior to that, a couple of years prior, one of the things that had happened on the site was in 6 days, they erected 6 different totems that had been carved to represent 6 of the villages the southernmost villages in Haida Gwaii. And apparently visitors came from all over the world for that event in that year. I don't have a lot of pictures of the center, but there's certainly a beautiful website, and it's a large, beautiful building and grounds. It's 50,000 square feet, I believe. I wrote that. And includes a museum. It's got an area where you can host a conference, and some burial remains on the site, and so forth. So that's the ferry going back home. The carving house, we were told that we would be welcome to go out on the grounds and watch what was going on in there while they were working, but that we were not to talk to them. And then if we had any questions about what they were doing, the staff inside, we were to come back and they would be happy to help us. On the plane going out, just sort of almost coincidentally, so here we are, July 2017, I was reading this story in the Globe and Mail about this mountain goat moon chest, which had been repatriated and brought back home to this museum just that summer. And you can look up the story online, July 8th, 2017, Marcia Laterman. And it goes into a lot of detail about all the negotiations that go on around the world to try and bring back remains of Haida Gwaii, and also items that had been shared with various places in the world. And I believe at this point, they had brought back the remains of some 500 Haida Gwaii people. And this chest had spent 100 years in a basement in a museum in the US. So that was a happy story for them, part of a ceremony. So the moon chest. And then I suppose this was maybe in the airport, just showing you where Haida Gwaii is in terms of Alaska and Prince Rupert. And we are headed way down here to the tip the next day. So these were a couple of the women working on hats, which I believe it's cedar strips that were used to make these gorgeous. So that was Monday. That was a wonderful day. So Tuesday, we are heading out with Moresby Explorers on a 3 to 4 hour Zodiac trip from, I believe it was called Moresby Landing. And in Gord's pre-trip literature, the notes about this boat trip said that we were to put on every single layer that we had brought, hopefully merino. If he told us once not to bring cotton, he must have told us a dozen times. Layer, balaclava, ski goggles, and even with all of that was our own, there would be a long waterproof parka type of thing that would go over top of our own clothes, which you'll see in the next photo. So the 6 people going to Rose Harbor were not the only ones on this Zodiac. So it was apparently the biggest Zodiac that they can use. And we had a number of other kayakers that were heading out on their own. And, you know, you can see their boats that were on the top. And of course, our boats were out at the site. So we were 200 horsepower motors, 2 guides, and excuse me, I don't know, 9 people. So here I am. You would never know who that was under there, all decked out. And I guess we wore our water shoes. That was part of what was so cold. It had to do with getting in and out of the boat. And, you know, he had strict instructions about wearing something that you didn't mind getting wet. Well, anyway, I grew up on big water in Lake Huron and in Georgian Bay, and have done a fair amount of boating, and I really generally enjoy boat trips of all kinds. This one was a whole new experience. I sat behind one of the tallest, biggest men on the Zodiac, and I was so grateful to have a lot of the spray and the wind shielded from me. But it was, as I said, between 3 and 4 hours. It was fairly gray, the scenery, there was not a lot to look at, and it was noisy and it was cold. And so we were all quite happy when we finally made it to our destination, which was Rose Harbor. So here we are, and this is the junior guide who was waiting out there helping us to bring things in. And unfortunately, Pam, as she was climbing out of the boat, slipped on the wet rocks and injured her ribs, which for a few hours was possibly a trip out of there, an air vac for her. Gordon checked her out to see if she could stay on the trip. And both she and I were super glad she could, with the help of a lot of ibuprofen and so on, but still, I can't help but think how much she would have enjoyed, how much more she might have enjoyed it if she hadn't done that. So after the first of many wonderful meals, the lunch, we got kind of kitted out and headed down to adjust our boats and go for a paddle with Gord, Huskok here, and Zach, so that he could see what he had for a week. And Gord, as I said, I've been doing this for 30 some years, and he had a lot of little adages, and one of them was expect nothing and prepare for everything. And that was kind of, I mean, it's a good way for an outdoor guide to think. So this is the lodge, if you like, at low tide. So this is the guest house, and it's very off the grid. And this is Gutz's house, And this is a man who moved here 40 some years ago. I believe he was originally from Europe, but he was a very interesting fellow and has developed this property in this lodge over all this time. And Pam's words were to describe Boots. She said he was a gifted, self-driven, stubborn, independent-minded brainiac who could figure out all sorts of new technology. He worked in Vancouver in the tech world for a while, but solar and wind power. And he built most of the buildings here without any form of power and chainsaw. And she said, she felt I should also mention that she was pretty sure the guest house would not meet code. And so where we slept, this was, the main floor had a little bit of a common area in one bedroom. And then up a angled ladder was our bedroom here with a skylight, and then a second bedroom. And then this part out back, I guess, is, I can't remember whether it was attached or not, but it wasn't big. And I'll show you the other buildings where we ate and so on. So that's the guest house. And but the bedroom itself had a lovely bed and sheets and blanket and, you know, as I said, nice windows and so on. So even though it was rustic in some ways, it was very comfortable, and that's why we were there. So this is the back door going in with all our stuff drying, and you can sort of see Goods's building style. So here we have low tide and some sunshine. We did not have, we had moisture at night. We didn't have brilliant sun every day, but we only had maybe half an hour of actually being rained on when we were paddling. And you can get an idea of the kayaks, and Zach paddled the double and Pam paddled with him. She said that the actual paddling was not the painful part. It was getting in and out of the boat and twisting around to put the skirt on. Those were the things that kind of took her breath away. So we paddled Wednesday and Thursday, basically, you know, all day. Probably didn't leave till 9:30 or 10, and we took beautiful lunch, and we get back, I don't know, 3 or 4. And one of the days was a little grayer and a little windier than the other one. So we, you know, we were exposed to a variety of weather. The day that was a little windier, we did some actual surfing on the waves coming back in, which I'd never done in a kayak. So this is the heating of the water for the showers when we got back. Now, whether Goods actually stood outside with a timer for 3 minutes for everyone, or whether that's an urban myth, I don't really know. But given how precious hot water was, I made sure that I was super organized before I got in for my time in the shower. And I looked at the pictures over the week and thought, you know, considering what kind of a shower it was and no power, my hair didn't look all that bad after 5 days. So here's Pam. She did a whole spread of the outhouse in the book she made. And might even be the same shot, just closer of some of the buildings, principally the guest house. And okay, we'll come back to this a little later on. It's part of the exhibit at Gwaii, the Friday site. So this is Susan, who is the only other person who has lived out there for 40 years. She came up to Canada from, I believe, New York City, and we call them draft evaders now. And she had raised a family here, and she's basically been here ever since. She was leaving that summer to return to life on the outside, but she had the garden full of the beautiful organic vegetables and cooked all these wonderful things. And so what she's doing this morning is grinding the flour on her exercise bike, and couldn't resist taking a photo of that. As I said, this is one of the shore, we used to call them shore dinners. You can see different kinds of bread baked every day. These were not paper plates, obviously. Plant-based food. This looks like tabbouleh, muffins, probably hummus in here. And yet, every night we had fresh halibut prepared a different way. So I asked Gord one day, at what point, like, how does that work? How do they know that they're going to, you know, at what point do they know they have fresh fish and move with that? And he said, well, one of the kitchen staff, and there was only two, and goes, somebody goes fishing every morning. And at some point in the day, if they haven't caught a halibut, then they move into plan B, which is, you know, some sort of gorgeous plant-based meal. But we were fortunate enough to, as I say, have halibut every night a different way. So this is kind of I just remember it as steamy with all these moist people in it, and there was a bit of a wood fire. We were just waiting for the rest of the group. These are the two guides. These were some people from another boat trip to serve and eat here in the dining area. So the next few shots are just of some of the other boats that came down to the harbor. And this boat was maybe similar to the sailing kayak trip that Gord did, because this captain had 6 women with him. And that particular day, they anchored here and did some things in Rose Harbor. I think they fished, and actually they caught the halibut, somebody in their group. And they had arranged to pay and join us for dinner. So we had a beautiful buffet outside because there wasn't the room in the lodge for all that many people, but it was even, you know, even more wonderful things to choose from than a normal night. So the other thing I wanted to mention about the boats that you see in the harbor, Good said at one point that he had, in the 40 years he'd been there, he'd been approached several times to sell gasoline and liquor at this southernmost tip, Rose Harbor, and he did neither. And he did not want to sell gasoline because he knew where the last spot was where they could fill up further north, and they could, all the little boats could not make their way down here. And so it helped to keep the place quieter and the amount of boat traffic out of there. This book was sitting around in the kitchen area, and it's written by Crozier or Musgrave, this very well-known, you can see the title down there, Canadian author who lives out on Haida Gwaii with her partner. And it's more than a cookbook, it's food gathering and feasting. And the library has a copy of this book as well. So if you'd like to look at, and it's a big part of what most people do. They do get involved in expeditions to look for all these wonderful things we can't eat here. Okay, so like I said, just different shots with low tide, and you can sense the peacefulness. And as I said, I had done some kayaking twice now out in the Broken Islands on the West Coast with a guide and a group. But one of the things that Gord dealt with here that I had never heard our other guides talk about was not just the tides, but he worked with the currents as well. And they influenced where he took us and when. Okay, so you gotta love that. Looks like evening setting in. And this is my longtime friend, Pam, who I shared a house with many, many years ago at the University of Waterloo, and a couple of other friends. We were all in the same course, and we occasionally get together in the summer and do something outdoors. So I was thrilled to have that time with her, and she's one of these people that you can just pick up with even if you haven't talked to them for a number of years, and it's right where you left off. So that's who I shared my room and my trip with. Looks like gourd. And this was not even the rainy day, but we can see hoods up. So Thursday, we had a rather long lunch break, if you like, and the beach that we pulled into had this rainforest area behind it. And so we did a hike right away. There was, over to the other side where the, water was on the other side. And I seem to remember there was a bit of a story revolving a bear, whether we saw the bear over on the other side or whether there had just recently been one, I don't know. But I associate that little hike with that. But Pam also reminded me that the lack of undergrowth in this area, which you would expect in a rainforest like this, was a result of the Europeans introducing what they call the red deer. And you will see a photo of one further along. But they have just taken over, and they can only be called by the First Nations. So they have influenced the ecosystems in the rainforest in a way that you wouldn't always expect. So here's Pam paddling with Zach, and just trees, 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 and just so quiet. So there's the growth. And we had, beach combing time and on that lunch stop. And then when it was time to pull out, Gord had been sort of snoozing on the beach. It was sunnier than this picture shows. But he must have said something like, 10 minutes for leaving. And Pam says to me, I think the reason we were parked here for this chunk of time wasn't just he wanted to snooze and give us, he was waiting for something to change with respect to the currents for our paddle back. So it's always special to see what's in the water in these places, and it's got a lot to do with why most of us like to go. And Pam is a very accomplished photographer. Okay, so this was clearly the day it actually rained. And because you can see the drops on the water. And so we pulled in at an island for us to, put on the rain jacket and the hoods and so on. And I knew my rain jacket was old and not all that great. So I tested it in Red Deer before I went to see how much it kept the wet out. And it was okay, with the exception of the hood. So one of the things on his list was a sou'wester hat, those yellow things that the fishermen in the Maritimes wear. And I had a friend that had taken this on various kayaking trips out on the coast and used hers a lot. So I thought, well, since my hood is not, going to help, I'll invest in one of those. But I kept the price tag on it, thinking if I don't use it, I'll return it. Came from Amazon. It's $50. So when we pulled into the shore and I pulled it out, I held it up with the tags and I said to the group, okay, just so you know, as soon as I take the tags off and put this on and, you know, commit, can't return it, the rain will stop. And sure enough, and I said, I'll take one for the group. And Gord said, yeah, he said, for me, same thing. The bigger the tarp I put up, the faster the rain stops. So, okay, so at one time, it was a whaling station, Rose Harbor. And so from 1910 to 1943. So those are two photos of some relics from those days. And it was mostly work by Chinese people. And Pam said it was called Rose Harbor because of the color of the water. So there's the deer, and there wasn't just one, there were two, and for some reason we called them William and Kate that summer. I don't know why. So these are some black clams, which were part of our Friday expedition. So we paddled Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday, Thursday, and then because Friday was the nicest day, part of this trip tour is Goods takes the group over to the UNESCO site where the totems are. And this one in the language is Gwaii is the name of it. And so he has us on his boat, and what he has passengers wear is the cold weather survival suits. And we all agreed that that would be preferable. That's what Moresby Explorers really should offer you on the Zodiac. But it was a beautiful day, and he had done this many, many times and called over and reserved. So we were the first ones into the bay on the east side of Anthony Island, where this very special UNESCO site is. And down in the corner of the photo here and here, you see one of the watchman staff. And so the watchmen are funded by Parks Canada, and they hire from May to October, both men and women from the ages of 16 to 78. And they live there at the site for 2 weeks at a time. And their role is, of course, to show it to us and explain it, but also to guard it, if you like. It's a sacred area for them. And so let me see if I missed it, because there's so many ancestors that reside here. So these are gorgeous pictures, and we spent quite a bit of time listening to him talk about the various poles and the carving, and inside there is, you know, a museum, exhibition, books. He explained that the elders' remains would be, their bodies would be in a mortuary for a while, and then the remains would be put inside the totem poles. And so they have, there's a photo coming up just of the plan. You don't, they have built one as an example to show you what the mortuary looked like. And then some photos of what the village looked like. And okay, so the houses are all numbered, and perhaps you can read it, maybe not, but every house has a name. So some of the names are, house number 3 is Thunder Rolls Upon It House. House number 6, House That Is Always Shaking. And then a couple of them have no name recorded. I love this one. House number 10, People Who Wish to Be There House. This is the mortuary in the book. And the one that they have at the site, the watchman that we had told us that he had rescued over his, I don't know how many years he worked there, a number of kayakers who had come across the strait or the open water to Anthony Island. This is an Anthony Island. I'm not sure why it's right here. And saved them. It was a big, big area of water, and let them camp in the mortuary, put their tent up and so on, just to dry out and calm, you know, recover. But he said after about 3 days, he'll say, okay, it's time to move on. So there we are, feeling warm and toasty. So after our morning, we had, again, a lovely lunch with us. Then we went out, out into the Pacific. We were out of the island area almost to see the sea lions and the seals. And we had many photos. And of course, you can almost imagine the sounds, the barking that goes on. And we were there bobbing around watching them for quite a while. And I never got to see how they get back up. You know, you could see them all, because they were disturbed, you know, flapping their way over to the wet rocks and pushing off and sliding in to the water and swimming, but never saw them flipping their way back up. Now, this shot is an intake of the pictures, I don't know, but it can only be from Gutz's boat because it's so high up. And my guess is it's looking west, southwest. And there are mountains in the Haida Gwaii area. We were not really aware of them because the sky was so low for most of the days that we were there, but you can sort of get a sense of them in the background. And there were puffins. Yeah. So puffins and seals. And now we're back at Rose Harbor, and that's Susan's house where she has lived for the 40-some years, and her garden. Imagine all that growth that far north and on the table daily. So we're almost finished the trip. This was Saturday morning. Gord had his camping group was coming into Rose Harbor on the Zodiac trip in, and then we were getting on to go back home. So this is our final group photo. So Zach and myself and Kathy and her husband from the island, I can't remember his name, he didn't kayak a lot, Gord and Pam, and then a young gal that was a lawyer from Calgary and her husband. So anyway, the final story, when the young Australian driver of the Zodiac greeted us to, you know, load after he'd let the other group out, he said to us, first of all, he said, it's sunny and warm in here in the harbor, but he said, out there, it is not. I'm just telling you, it's rainy and it's rough. And having already had the trip down, we had some idea what to expect. And we were all kind of doing things a little bit differently for the trip back, hoping it might be a little more comfy. One of the guys, was going to listen to his iPod up front. And we decided what we were going to put on our feet. We didn't care if it got wet because, we're going home. And that would be warmer. So he said, the driver, 45 minutes in, we can stop and make a decision. We can go inland, which will be a slightly longer trip, but not as rough, or stay out there. Okay. So it's a smaller Zodiac, and we get one first big wave, the iPod's soaked, that guy's soaked, we're back in it. And so I just sat there with my head down and, not really looking, because it was kind of rougher than even the day we came out. And I did everything I could to take my head out of that. And like I said, I'm pretty used to boat trips. I did my breathing, I thought about my happy place, but still my mind just stayed right in it. So when he finally cut the motor, I said, the only other experience in my life that I could think of where all I could think of was when will be over was childbirth. And he laughed and he says, you're the second woman this week. He said, someone else said, the last time I was that miserable, someone gave me a baby at the end. So needless to say, we voted unanimously for the inland longer trip. And anyway, we were safe and sound, and we went on our way. And, Pam and I were headed elsewhere. She was going to Victoria to see her son, and I was going, Vancouver. And some people stayed a little longer on the islands. So that is my 5-day trip to Haida Gwaii.
Oh, it's wonderful. The pictures are so great. And it looks like you had pretty good weather from what we hear about weather on Haida Gwaii. So that's good.
Yeah.
It's good thing you took your sou'wester.
I never had to wear it.
Yeah.
It's a keepsake, right?
Yes, they were all grateful for you bringing that. Yes, but you didn't get any souvenirs from there yourself. Like you collected shells or anything? Are you a rock collector or a shell collector?
No, and you're actually in a park, right?
Right, so you're not supposed to be, yeah.
Yeah.
So the guest house is in the park too?
Yeah, but it wasn't in a park when he started it, of course, 40 years ago, right? All of this has just happened in the last 20 years at the most. And it's, and Goots is good friends with a lot of the Haida Gwaii people. And because he's lived there so long, it's sometimes interesting to eavesdrop on some of the conversations about, there's still tensions over certain things, and probably always will be on both sides, right? Yeah. How they try and manage it. I think they were talking about the new park superintendent that was coming, and it was just sort of the classic Parks Canada superintendent discussion. Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask you too about Goots. So does he stay there in the winter?
He does. And he said once, I find this hard to even imagine. He spends 4 months of the year where he sees not another human being. So he's a self-reliant guy.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess that's when he does his repairs and things, maybe, or.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he must like to fish.
I guess. I don't know. He wasn't around a lot. He was always at the meals. But yeah, he must like to fish.
So the picture of the house, the one of them, it looked like there was a pond that was created sort of in front of the guest house? Was that a pond or not?
I think it's just low tide, and
Oh, okay.
I was going to comment on that because, of course, there's no plumbing, right?
Oh, okay.
And so one of the things that he does is he leaves, I think he calls it a honey pot, in every bedroom, like a bucket, so that if you need to whiz in the night, you're not trying to go down the ladder, and so you've got that option. And so I did use it one night, so therefore, it's up to me to empty it the next morning. And the tide is the furthest out that it can possibly be while you're walking over these completely wet rocks full of moss and everything with this bucket, hoping to get to the edge real soon before you and the bucket, yeah. So that's what that is. It's just
okay.
a low tide scene in front of the guest house.
So you showed Susan grinding the flour on that exercise bike. So do you have one now? Did you come home and immediately get a flour grinding exercise bike? No.
No. And I don't make sourdough bread either. No. She did get she had a grocery order, that came, and she had organic yogurt and this and that, but and to do all that amazing cooking almost in front of people, because it's not a very big area, and she did have an assistant, but it's pretty public, everything they do, and it's,
Well, she'd be heating water too, or whatever, for doing dishes and things too. And
yeah, she always had coffee on in the morning, and we had great porridge one morning, and but it was the various breads and the veggies and the fish
and the halibut. Yeah.
Yeah.
So she had 5 different ways to make halibut.
Yeah, and I wish I could remember what they were, but I think one of them was kind of stir fry-y. They were a variety of ways. Maybe not so much for Gord, but for us they were. People that work in outdoor camps and so on, they get to know, okay, it's Tuesday night, and that means we're having halibut this way.
Yeah. So you ended by describing how tough it was getting back to the main island, but would you go back again despite that?
I would, and what I would say to that, I think it was Kathy who said this. I don't know. It was one of the other women said that the Zodiac trip was almost enough. Well, I think she said it was enough to keep her from doing that again. And I said, well, because you can fly out there on a seaplane, and it's not, I don't imagine it's a lot more money to go on a seaplane with, let's say it's $500 round trip. I don't know. But the thing is, I don't think Gord would let you do it on the trip out, because he needs his group for Tuesday afternoon. And if the skies are such that the seaplane can't fly and you're not there, then it messes up his timing. So I think that you might, and it's built into the price, the Zodiac return trip. But if I was to do it again, that's what I would try and do, is see what it says about using the seaplane both ways. I'm pretty sure I'd say no. But as far as taking it home, when, it doesn't matter if I'm marooned there for an extra night of halibut. So yeah, I would go.
So I just wanted to mention that Nancy had some book suggestions for us for this. We can do further research or further dreaming about going on this trip. So one of them is I'll get it here, The Hidden Life of Trees, and we have a lovely illustrated edition at the library. So I think you would enjoy that. It's just incredible photography and stories about them. What did you want to say?
Well, I thought of this book and told Priscilla, I said, when we were jammed in this shuttle bus with all these strangers driving through the rainforest out to get on the Zodiac, this young girl beside me who was going kayaking, I was thinking about this book, and I turned to her and I said, you know, there's this book called, and she says, yeah, I know, I've read that book. And, you know, she's probably in her 20s. So we started chatting about the book and what it has to say about trees. And then somehow, very quickly, we found that we had a friend in common, someone in the outdoor world that I think was actually my age. And this young girl was a good 30 years younger than I am. And I forget what the connection was. I think it might have been Pam and I lived in this house with Barb as well. And I think she might have known Barb through kayaking or something. And it just came up very quickly. And so the combination of her having read that book and then knowing someone from across the country and across the generations that I knew, I just thought, you know, the outdoor world is fairly connected. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we do have books on traveling to Haida Gwaii and a DVD too. Haida Gwaii on the Edge of the World, you might like to see. And the complete Sea Kayaker's Handbook for when we can go back to BC. And the joy of forest bathing, which is kind of the rage now, right? We're all appreciating the green spaces in Red Deer too. So thank you for suggesting the book list.
Oh, and the Golden Spruce.
And the Golden Spruce, which is out right now. Sorry. Always a good thing for a library to be able to say, no, you have to put your name down to get this book. It's so special.
And that book, perhaps some of the people watching know the book, and I read it a long time ago, but it's a tale of a true story. During protests around logging, this very special spruce tree, because of the color, right, golden, was in the middle of a night somehow cut down by, and so one point we were sitting around maybe after lunch or something, some of the people on trip got talking about this and were musing about whether that guy was perhaps still out there roaming around, that, you know, because I don't think they'd ever actually captured him and, you know, confronted him with what happened. So anyway.
Wow.
But I mean, it was long ago. The book was
Yes.
written in 2005. So
yeah, no, if he's still around or not, right? I don't know.
Yeah, well, yeah, probably not very likely, but that's how the book came up.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we have a shout out from Joanne Devries to thank you for sharing today. We always appreciate people willing to volunteer to do this for us. And I want to mention that next time on June 2nd, Anita and Jane will be back to talk again. They're also speakers that have come back more than once. And they'll be talking about camping in the time of COVID. So they did some camping last summer and learned some tips and saw some interesting things. And they're going to share with us in June about that. So thank you all for joining us. And thank you so much, Nancy.
Thank you.
See you all next time.
Okay, bye for now.